Okay, so whatever. Hi, welcome to the Inked Feather, and this video will be the first of many to come. This will be a mini-series that is supposed to be in... What the fuck am I even saying? I'm just gonna look at my notes, whatever. Let's make this video chill. I mean, yeah, you don't know me, I don't know you, you just clicked on the link somehow and you're you're trying to figure out what the hell this whole thing is about, and so am I actually. I mean, the channel has been on for a while and there was practically nothing on it for this whole time, and now I'm like, yeah, let's make a video and let's make it about the never-ending tales. And yeah, what is the never-ending tales? That's what you're asking yourself right now. Well, my friend, the never-ending tales is a book. But before being a book, it was actually a blog. Here's the thing, we need some context. I've been working on fiction for about 16 years so far. I've started with, fan fiction. Everybody starts somewhere, and that's how I started. I was like 12 or 13 when I started doing fan fiction, and by the age of 15, I thought that I was done with it, so I wanted to move on to do some more serious fiction, let's say. And I worked on my first book that was actually in French, not even in English. It was called L'Ange Déchu, which translates to The Fallen Angel. And yes, it was like a young adult fantasy story about earthborn angels that are seeking to come back to their own reality, to their own realm, the Angels' Kingdom, which is coincidentally the name of the first arc of the Neverending Tales. And without further ado, I'm gonna present to you the actual book, because the Neverending Tales, well, I tried to self-publish it for a little bit, for actually 5 years, and I sold some copies of it, not a lot, but a decent amount, and among those copies I got my own copy. And this is it. This is the actual prototype. If you can notice, like, the title is not complete. The font is kind of shit, and to be honest, I'm not a very fan of the cover. It was made with a zero budget, basically. So, but the idea is like representative of the theme. So it's the Neverending Tales with the Tail and not Tale. So yeah, it's like a tale, like an animal tale, and those are supposed to be the actual tales, and they're representing infinity, which is like a literal image of the title, The Neverending Tales. And the tales are also supposed to be the word lines, the many realities that form this multiverse of stories. Because that's the kind of stories I have been working on even since like my fan fiction period. I've always been interested in, you know, having different contexts, different universes in which certain stories would happen, and eventually having those universes cross over in some way or fashion. And yeah, I think this kind of carried on in my writing up to nowadays. And the multiverse drive, well, the thing is, the multiverse drive wasn't exactly the project following The Fallen Angel. I did try to write a few other stories. Some of them were involving time travel, most of them which make some sort of cameos within the Neverending Tales, because the Neverending Tales was kind of like the backdrop, the index for all those potential stories. They influenced this, like, growing multiverse of stories, and the Neverending Tales was like the final iteration of them. Well, it came in phases. Like the first phase of it, as I said before, was the blog, and the blog was basically a WordPress blog that I started uh, during college. It took about, I think, a year and a half to get to the number of chapters included in volume 1, which is actually 24 chapters. And I also worked in the meantime on a novella, let's say, or like a short story for a contest. Yeah, for a science fiction contest, and that is also included in this edition of the Neverending Tales, but more on that later. For now, what I'm intending to do is to actually dive in the first arc, which is the Angel's Kingdom. And yeah, as I said, the Angel's Kingdom was, like kind of an out of focus kind of exploration of that universe, because that universe was the backdrop or the setting for my first book. And the first book was especially about this character called Bill Stone. Well, Bill Stone was the name he was given. His real name was Billy L, but there is like I don't really know what his real last name is. However, this character was an Earthborn angel, and he lived with a foster family, and then he discovered that he was from another world, which is the Angel's Kingdom, which led him on this quest where he met with other Earthborn angels that were also trying to get back to their world, and they had to go through this initiation, like quests through which they learn about like the nature of their species, the angels, and what they're supposed to do once they get to the other world. However, this special initiation process is for a reason, and the main reason why it's put in place is because the words might be connected, like in that specific cluster of universes, what I call the Earth Earth Beta reality. There is Earth Beta Plus and Earth Beta Minus, and also Earth Beta Null, but more on that later. For now, let's focus on Earth Beta Plus and Earth Beta Minus. So Earth Beta Plus is the Angel's Kingdom. It's the world in which the angels first appeared as the sentient species instead of humans. Later on, certain events led to the creation of Earth Beta Minus, which is the human world in which some angels inevitably are born, and sometimes they seek to get back to Earth Beta Plus, and to do so they go through the quest. And the reason why they have to go through the quest is because there is a gate that is called the Angel's Door, and that is the connection between the two worlds. And the way to reach that gate is you must know its location from Earth Beta Plus's side. That's the only way to go to Earth Beta Minus. If you're in Earth Beta Minus, you can't really know where the door is unless you go through the quest. And that's like an exception only put in place to help Earthborn angels to go back to Earth Beta Plus if they desire to do so. And the whole reason why there is this whole rule and everything is linked with the first of the Fallen, the actual antagonist of the first book, which let's spoil the first book because it's in French and nobody will read it anyway, is actually the father of the main character, the biological father at least. It's a complicated scenario. It's a Zeus-like scenario where Lucifer shapeshifted into the husband of like this couple of angels that were on Earth, and he shapeshifted into the couple of the lady, and then like procreated with her and gave birth to the main character. And they thought that the child was theirs, but he was actually Lucifer's, and the reason why he had this child was to have a child that would go on the quest so he could tail him all along and find the door, because Lucifer got banished from Earth Beta Plus to Earth Beta Minus, and that's what the Angel's Kingdom arc is actually about. Like the first chapter in it, which is called The Fallen One, which is a direct connection to the fallen angel, because this chapter is the backstory of Lucifer. So I'm going to go through the chapter and kind of give an overview of what's happening, not really read the chapter, because what would be the fun in that, and you can actually do it for yourself if you're getting more and more curious while I'm talking about this. So I'm not gonna go too in depth into certain elements of the chapters because I would like to talk more about those when I'm covering the second arc of the Neverending Tales, which is the arc of the gods. And yeah, those aspects or elements literally like come to play in that arc more prominently. And yeah, starting with chapter one. So chapter one is basically, it starts with like literally the beginning of everything. So it's like it describes the word before the word, where like the void was present and the silence and chaos, and more on that later on when we're gonna talk about the gods. And it describes the birth of the universe, and more specifically the Earth beta cluster. So even more specifically, the Earth beta plus reality, which was the first one of the Earth beta realities before it became a cluster. So it talks about the first sentient life that appears. The chapter goes on and talks about the first sentient life that appeared in that universe, which I call the first Adam. Initially, I wanted to call the character the Adam Kadmon, which is a direct reference to, I think, Jewish Kabbalah, because in Kabbalah, the first creation was the Adam Kadmon, not the actual human Adam, and that's what I'm referring to in here. So the first Adam was the first soul that was like that appeared in that universe. I'm not really pointing into any kind of creator or God that creates the first Adam. All I'm saying is that the first Adam appeared. And then when he appeared, he was like the center of that universe, like the literal physical and spiritual center. Everything was revolving around him. And from his soul, like literally eons later, the first souls of like the sentient beings started to appear, and those were the angels. And I'm describing how their society was first peaceful and kind of simple, but then it started to progress more and more, you know. And they had gifts, they had control over certain elements, so they can control things like fire or water or earth or like wind, but also like lightning and even light and darkness, and you know, like a lot of things basically. But also some of them were born without those powers, and I'm pointing that out because that's kind of important. That comes back in chapter 3 because there's more focus on that aspect that plays out, and I will come back to that later. So for now, we're following up with we're following up with like the nature of that society, and then after describing how the society is, then I go on and talk about the kind of like a structure of the society, and the leadership within the society is actually like taken by the archangels, which are like the highest caste, because there is some sort of like, at least not really a caste system, but more of like a class system for the angels. So the archangels are the highest class, and they're the ones who lead the society. And in that era, the council of archangels was formed by 7 archangels, 6, and the 7th one was the one presiding over them. And the 7th archangel was no one other than Lucifer. So he did, like, after pointing out that he was the leader of that council, I go on and talk about his backstory and how he became an archangel. The thing is, in this like continuity, archangelhood is something that you ascend into. You need to do an action of selfless sacrifice in order to achieve that status, and that self-sacrifice should almost like be so selfless that you're ready to give up your own life, for instance, to protect others in the process. That's how most archangels become archangels. They're usually just regular angels, and after that act they ascend into archangelhood. And I describe how it happened for Lucifer. So for Lucifer, he was in love with Lilith. So in this context, Lilith is also an angel, and she's the sister of Azrael, the angel of death. And yeah, Lucifer is in love with her basically, but one day she got bitten by a scarlet snake, and in that reality, scarlet snake's venom is the most deadly venom there is. So Lucifer is like, like trying to figure out a way to heal her from that poison, and apparently there is no real way. But then he figure out that there is like this legendary fountain somewhere within Earth Beta Plus that if he reach can potentially heal any poison, any wound, anything. So he goes on this quest and he's like desperate, and then he finds that he finds the legendary fountain of light, which is like a reference to what we call the fountain of youth, maybe la fontaine de jouvence, yeah. And instead of being like a literal like water fountain, it's a fountain that is like, like you're like you're covered with like this intense light, and whatever ailment you have is instantly healed. So he discovers it, and then he intentionally like like he cuts himself and goes within it, and then he's instantly healed. So after noticing that, he instantly flies back and then carries Lilith over. But when he comes back, he has to face with a seven-headed hydra. I know this doesn't make sense because hydra literally means that it has 8 heads, but maybe it lost one of its heads, I don't know. However, he has to fight with this hydra that is guarding the cave where the fountain is, and at the same time he needs to get on with it because Lilith is getting more and more poisoned, and she's closer to just dying out of like the poison reaching her heart or something. So he end up winning, but he's almost like he's on the verge of death himself. But instead of going to the fountain first and then going back for Lilith, he decides to go back bloody and pained, and bring Lilith to the fountain. And then when he heals her, then he finally tries to move on himself, but he's like so tired and he's like on the edge of accepting death, and that's when he ascends because of his action, because he decided to save her first regardless of the consequence for his own life. And then when he ascends, yeah, that's how the origin story kind of ends, the origin story section of the chapter. Then I switch back to how the discovery of the fountain kind of changed the very essence of the angel's word, because what the fountain did is not just heal ailments or like wounds, but it could also like keep people young, so they would stop aging. So it gave the angels their longer lifespan, but at the same time they would still be vulnerable, so if they really needed to heal, they would need to go back into the fountain. So after that, I switch back to the actual conflict that led to Lucifer's banishment from his reality, because after becoming an archangel and showing up like this kind of like hero-like aspect to his character, he kind of falls from grace. And the reason why he falls from grace is, ironically enough, because he wanted to advance his society, but he wanted to advance it in a way that was pushing all the barriers and all the taboos within the angels realm. So what he wanted to make his society quote unquote perfect is to access the power of the first Adam, of the Adam Kadmon. So he researched the Adam Kadmon and he tried to locate it, and he tried to siphon some of its power and to use it to progress, increasingly progress the angel society, like exponentially progress it. But the other archangels in the council were against the idea, and they tried to stop him, and they disagreed for years, but like they also had the collaboration of another archangel, which is the hidden one, the eighth archangel, which didn't reach his status through self-sacrifice, but more on that one when we reach chapter 2, because that chapter is mostly dedicated to him. All we need to know for now is that his name was Michael Gray. And yeah, so Michael Gray with the other archangels established the law of taboo, which was this law that forbid, like any further research within the within things like the first Adam, and that pushed, you know, yeah. Yeah, that and another specific event pushed Lucifer to go against the council. So not only did they stop him from researching the first Adam further, but they accidentally killed Lilith in a raid. And the problem is that yes, the fountain gives you eternal youth, but it doesn't give you immortality. So after losing Lilith and being stopped from doing like what he believed was the best course of action for his word, he was done. So he went on a crusade, on an actual war against the council with other angels, and with those other angels, they they denied their angelic nature, so they gave up being angels, and they became creatures of pure wrath. They became the first fallen. They became the demons, and that's how the demon kind appeared on that reality. So they entered this long drawn out war with the council, and Lucifer lost the war. And the reason why he lost the war wasn't because he didn't have the power to win, it was because most of the angels that, chose to go on his side weren't able to control themselves when they fell. They basically became creatures of pure instinct, of pure wrath, and it was hard to lead them in battle. And because the angels had like a lot of tactics and a lot of numerically they were about the same, like they were a good fit, but they were like more in control of their abilities, and that's why they won the war. So when Lucifer lost the war, what happened is that the cherubs, which are in this reality the engineers of the angels' world, that's like their class. So what they did is like they designed this seal for Lucifer's soul, which made him technically immortal. What this seal did is that it constantly kept him in contact with the fountain. His soul was constantly kept in contact with his fountain, which meant that his body would constantly regenerate, as if it was constantly within the fountain, even if he was in another location. And they pushed him through the channel of rebirth, which was the first primordial connection between Earth Beta Plus and Earth Beta Minus, the human world. So when he descended within the human world, he had this new like immortal body, and because he couldn't die, he couldn't reach back Earth Beta Plus, because death in Earth Beta Minus would lead the soul of the dead to ascend within Earth Beta Plus, where they would reform a body, and then Earth Beta Null is the next level, because you can die in Earth Beta Plus still, and then your soul just reaches Earth Beta Null, which is technically the realm of the common consciousness. All the last three remaining, the last resting place for all the souls within that cluster. But all those events will be further explained in chapter 2. But yeah, we're getting close to that. Yeah, so basically, yeah, those events, Lucifer was sent over. He was basically banished when humanity was starting to appear in Earth Beta Minus. So let's say that it was around like the Stone Age, and he had to stay among humans until the modern era, where he finally was able to have a son and then to follow him back to be able to return to that reality. Well, that story continues, but I never really wrote the complete account of it. Like, I have outlines of what happens. I have I know what happens exactly with him, and his story goes further and further. There is like an even like I will come to that in further arcs, but he's a recurrent character somehow. And technically, when he returned to the Angel's Kingdom, that led to him seeking back the first Adam, and that led to other things. But that's for later. So for now, I think that concludes chapter 1. Yes. So after this, I'm gonna jump in chapter 2, which is about the hidden archangel Mikkel Gray.